Oh, wonderful. Another day at the Galactic Academy, where they apparently think the best way to teach xenobiology is through psychological warfare. I'm Crix 9, by the way, and yes, before you ask, that's my actual name, not some mathematical equation gone wrong. So there I was, sitting in advanced predator studies, minding my own business and desperately trying not to think about how ironic it was that a prey species like me was taking this class. My species, the Vikshari, are basically what happens when evolution decides rabbits need to be blue and slightly more neurotic. We've got excellent hearing, lightning-fast reflexes, and an impressive ability to panic at absolutely everything. Professor Gorthval, who looks like a walking tree stump with anger management issues, decided today would be perfect for what he called practical demonstration. Because apparently, theoretical learning is for weaklings. Class, he announced, his bark-like skin crackling with what I can only assume was enthusiasm, though it sounded more like branches snapping in a storm. Today we have a very special guest. The room fell silent. Even Pip 3, who never stops chattering about her collection of safety protocols, went quiet. When Pip goes quiet, you know something's seriously wrong. I've arranged for a live predator hatchling to visit our class. Gorthval continued, clearly enjoying the collective intake of breath that followed. This will help you understand predator behavior patterns in their natural state. Natural state? In a classroom? I swear, sometimes I wonder if professors get their degrees from the same place they sell those instant academic wisdom pills. The door hissed open, and in walked Cadet Vex Prime, carrying what looked like a small, furry death machine. It was about the size of a large fruit, covered in striped orange and black fur, with tiny but disturbingly sharp-looking claws. Its ears were perked up, and its tail was swishing in what I could only interpret as predatory anticipation. Behold! Gorthval proclaimed, like he'd just discovered fire, a juvenile Terran feline. One of the most efficient micro-predators in known space. The class collectively scooted backward. Well, all of us except for one individual, Marcus Kane, the human exchange student, barely looked up from his datapad. Oh yes, we have a human in our class. Because apparently, the administration thought it would be educational to have an actual apex predator species audit our predator studies course. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a plasma torch. Marcus had been here for 3 weeks now, and he was terrifyingly normal. He said please and thank you, helped classmates with assignments, and brought snacks to share. It was deeply unsettling. We'd all read the files. Humans were persistence hunters, pack coordinators, and had somehow clawed their way to the top of their planet's food chain despite lacking natural weapons, armor, or even decent speed, and now here was Vex Prime, trying to be intimidating with a tiny predator that was currently mewing in what sounded distinctly like distress. Notice the predatory stance. Gorthval continued his lecture, apparently oblivious to the fact that the predatory stance looked more like small animal having an existential crisis. The kitten, because let's call it what it was, looked around the room with wide eyes. Its mewing grew louder and more pitiful. Several of my classmates were hyperventilating, which, to be fair, was pretty much our default state anyway. It's when Marcus finally looked up. Oh, he said, his face lighting up in a way that should have been terrifying but somehow wasn't. Is that a kitten? The entire class turned to stare at him. Even Professor Gorthval paused mid-gesture. Kitten? Pip 3 whispered, like she was learning a new swear word. Marcus stood up and walked over to Vex Prime, who was holding the creature at arm's length like it might explode. Which, given our understanding of Terran predators, wasn't entirely unreasonable. Hey there, little guy, Marcus said softly, extending his hand toward the kitten. What happened next would be burned into my memory forever. The tiny predator, this allegedly fierce micro-hunter, took one look at Marcus and began to purr. Not just any purr, mind you, but a full-throated, rumbling purr that seemed far too loud for something so small. Oh, you're just a baby, aren't you? Marcus cooed, gently taking the kitten from the stunned Vex Prime. Where's your mama? The kitten immediately snuggled against Marcus's chest, its purring growing even louder. Its tiny paws kneaded against his uniform, and it began to nuzzle his chin with obvious affection. The silence in the classroom was deafening. That is. Professor Gorthval stammered, his bark skin flushing a deeper brown. This was supposed to demonstrate predatory aggression patterns. Marcus looked genuinely confused. Aggression? Professor, this is just a kitten. They're basically helpless until they're several months old. He scratched behind the little creature's ears, eliciting an even louder purr. This little one is probably scared and missing its littermates. The kitten chose that moment to curl up against Marcus and close its eyes, apparently deciding that this particular apex predator made an excellent pillow, and that's when it hit me. The humans weren't just predators. They were something far more terrifying. They were caretakers. The revelation hit our class like a meteor strike to the brain. Marcus wasn't just a predator. He was a predator who adopted other predators as pets. The implications were staggering, and frankly, made my antennae twitch with nervous energy. Caretakers, I whispered to myself, and apparently loud enough for Zarakim, the crystalline-scaled Nexilian sitting next to me, to hear. "What did you say?" she hissed, her scales shifting to a pale yellow color that meant either confusion or impending digestive distress. Before I could answer, Marcus had done something that defied all logic, reason, and basic survival instincts. He'd sat back down at his desk, still cradling the kitten, and was now letting it sleep in his lap while he resumed taking notes like nothing had happened. Professor Gorthval stood there, mouth opening and closing like a broken atmospheric recycler. His carefully planned lesson had just been demolished by a human showing basic kindness to a baby animal. "Perhaps," the professor said, clearing his throat with a sound like grinding bark, "we should observe the predator's relaxation behaviors instead." Relaxation behaviors. The kitten was fast asleep, occasionally making tiny squeaking sounds that Marcus seemed to find adorable rather than threatening. Every few minutes, Marcus would gently stroke its fur, and the purring would intensify to levels that should have required seismic equipment to measure. "This is fascinating," whispered Orin 12, a mantid-like Thackeray whose compound eyes were practically bulging out of his head. "The apex predator is exhibiting nurturing behaviors toward a competing predator species." Competing? Marcus looked up, apparently having overheard despite the Thackeray's attempt at whispering. "Oh no, cats aren't competition. They're family." Family. He said it so casually, like adopting micro-predators was just something humans did on weekends between conquering solar systems. "But surely," Professor Gorthval interjected, desperate to salvage his lesson, "your species must have evolved some natural wariness toward other predators?" Marcus considered this while the kitten stretched in his lap, tiny claws briefly extending before retracting. "Well, I suppose we're cautious around things that might actually hurt us. But this little guy?" He smiled down at the sleeping furball. "Humans have been living with cats for about 10,000 years. We're basically co-evolved at this point. 10,000 years. They'd been domesticating other predators for 10,000 years." I felt my ears flatten against my head as the true scope of human terrifyingness became clear. "Co-evolved how?" Pip 3 asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Oh, it's pretty cool actually," Marcus said, warming to the topic. "Cats helped us control pests, and we provided them with food and shelter. Over time, they developed traits specifically to communicate with humans, like meowing. Adult cats don't really meow at each other, just at us." The silence that followed this revelation was pregnant with horror. They'd convinced another predator species to modify their communication specifically for humans. This was psychological warfare on a level we hadn't even imagined. "So," Zarakim said slowly, "they changed themselves to talk to you?" "More like they figured out what sounds made us go awe and give them treats," Marcus laughed, completely missing the existential terror he was inspiring. "Smart little hunters." The kitten chose that moment to wake up, stretch, and then look directly at me with bright green eyes. I froze, every instinct screaming at me to run, hide, or at minimum stop making eye contact with a predator, but then something impossible happened. The kitten tilted its tiny head, blinked slowly at me, and made a soft meow sound. "Oh, she likes you." Marcus beamed. "That slow blink? That's a cat kiss. She's saying you're not a threat." "Not a threat?" A predator had just evaluated me and decided I was harmless. I wasn't sure if I should be relieved or insulted. "Would you like to pet her?" Marcus asked. "Her name's Luna, by the way." The classroom held its collective breath. A human was offering to let a prey species interact with his predator companion. This was either an unprecedented gesture of trust or an elaborate trap. Against every survival instinct I possessed, I reached out one trembling finger toward Luna. She sniffed it delicately, then began to purr again and rubbed her tiny head against my finger. The sensation was warm. Soft. Completely non-threatening. "She's so small," I whispered, amazed. "All babies are vulnerable," Marcus said gently. "That's why adults protect them. It's not about predator or prey, it's about taking care of those who can't take care of themselves." Professor Gorthval made a strangled sound. His entire curriculum was based on the assumption that predators were inherently dangerous, that the galaxy was divided into hunters and hunted. But here was a human, the most successful predator species known, treating a lesson about predatory behavior like an impromptu pet therapy session. "But your species," Orin 12 said, "you're apex predators. Surely you must have some aggressive instincts?" Marcus's expression grew thoughtful. "Oh, we absolutely do. Humans can be incredibly dangerous when we need to be. But aggression and violence? Those are tools, not personality traits. We use them when necessary to protect what matters to us." He looked down at Luna, who had curled up again and was purring contentedly. "Like this little one." If something threatened her, then yes, you'd see exactly how dangerous humans can be. But as long as she's safe and happy, there's no need for any of that. And there it was. The thing that made humans truly terrifying wasn't their capacity for violence. It was their capacity for love. They'd turned the entire galaxy's understanding of predator behavior on its head by demonstrating that the most dangerous species in known space was also the most nurturing. As the class ended and Marcus gently handed Luna back to the bewildered Vex Prime, promising to check on her later, I realized something profound had happened. We'd all come to this class expecting to learn about predators. Instead, we'd learned about family, and somehow, that was far more revolutionary than any lesson plan Professor Gorthval could have devised. The humans hadn't conquered their world through superior violence. They'd done it by making everything else want to join them. Terrifying.